Hello everyone, we're going to read about Geronimo Stitton, the enormous pearl heist. Sizzling sweet beat. It was a blistering hot summer. That day, I had decided to skip the hot subway ride and work from home. I was sweating at my desk, finishing up my latest bestseller when suddenly, oops, how rude, I almost forgot to introduce myself. My name is Stitton. Geronimo Stitton. I am the editor of the Rodent Gazette, the most popular paper on Mouse Island. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, I was tapping away at my computer when all of a sudden I heard a terrible hissing noise. Hiss. I nearly jumped out of my fur. It sounded like a den of snakes. I was about to climb up onto my desk when I heard a strange knocking sound. Knock, knock, knock. Before I could get to the door, I heard a small explosion. Bam! Just then, black smoke started pouring out of my old air conditioned unit. But immediately, it seemed like the room grew degrees hotter. I tried calling all the appliance stores in New Mouse City to see if I could get a new unit, but they were either out of stock or on vacation. Sweat trickled down my fur. I was hotter than the award-winning entry at the New Mouse City Great Balls of Fire Chili Cook-Off. To keep cool, I tried 1. Eating tons of ice pops. 2. Wrapping my head in frozen towels. 3. Putting my paws in the pail of ice water. 4. Taking a cold shower every 30 minutes. 5. Turning on my giant fan. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Drastic times called for drastic measures, I said to myself. Then I filled a bathtub with ice cubes, grabbed my manuscript, and immersed myself in the icy water. Oh, it's so nice to be cool, I squeaked happily. I had just begun reading when the doorbell rang. Ding dong, ding dong. Holy cheese. I was so startled I almost dropped my manuscript into the water. With a groan, I climbed it out of the bathtub, wrapped a towel around my waist, and went downstairs. This better be important, I mumbled, flinging the door open. A beautiful rodent stood before me. Petunia pretty paws, I exclaimed, turning red with embarrassment. What a surprise! A gift for me? Hi, G, she answered, bounding her inside. One thing you should know about Petunia, besides being smart, beautiful, and kind, she has a ton of energy. How are you, Nipudia? I mean, Tipunia? I mean, Petunia? Petunia? I babbled. Oh, why do I always sound like such a fool around Petunia? It was bad enough that I was dressed in an old bath towel. After more humiliating babbling, I managed to explain to Petunia about my broken air conditioner. Then I told her to wait in the living room while I scampered off to get dressed. I quickly drew on some clothes, poured 2 glasses of orange soda with ice, and returned to Petunia. Just the sight of her made my heart go thump, thump, thump. In case you haven't guessed, I have a total crush on Petunia. Too bad I'm too shy to tell her. Just then Petunia handed me an envelope. I bought you a gift, she said. For me, I was so excited. Inside was a sheet of paper that said, "This certificate good for scuba diving lessons on Shell Island." I gulped. How could I tell Petunia I was afraid to scuba dive? I could barely swim. Thanks. But I began, but Petunia cut me off. No buts, G. I'm going to Shell Island to film a documentary and I want you to come. It will be fun, she insisted. I was torn. On the one paw, I had to fly. I hate to swim in the ocean, and I hate to sleep in strange hotel beds. But on the other paw, how could I say no to the rodent of my dreams? Well, I guess I began. Great, it's settled, said Petunia. We're bringing Benjamin and Buggy Woogsy. Aunt Sweet Fun is coming along to watch them while I work on your rest. Another thing about Petunia, she's super organized. When do we leave? I asked. Immediately, Petunia squeaked. I'm ready. Moldy mozzarella. It turned out Petunia wasn't exaggerating when she said we were leaving immediately. In fact, I had only 10 minutes to pack. It's not easy to pack when you're a rush. I shall know. When I packed in a rush once before, I forgot to bring lots of important things like my chamomile tea and my cheese ball, the cloud night light. After that happened, I promised myself I'll always be prepared. That's why I always keep two suitcases into my closet. The red one is packed with everything I need for hot places. The blue one has everything I need for cold places. So I grabbed the red suitcase and raced back to Petunia. Okay, I'm ready, I said triumphantly. Petunia's jaw nearly hit the ground. How did you pack so fast? She squeaked. It just takes practice, I answered with a grin. I could tell Petunia was impressed. My heart did a happy flip-flop. A few minutes later, we were in Petunia's zoo, headed for Aunt Switford's to pick up her, Benjamin, and Bugsy Wugsy, who were all ready to go. See what I mean about Petunia being organized? When we arrived, Benjamin and Bugsy Wugsy hugged us. Actually, Boxy nearly choked me to death, but that's another story. Aunt Switford kissed us hello, then Uncle Grayford clapped me on the back so hard I felt like I might never walk again. For a retired sea captain, that old Redden sure is strong. I'll give my whiskers to come with you, Uncle Grayford bellowed, but I got an important conference at the old captain's lodge, and I can't miss it. Have a nice trip, just watch out for sharks. Everybody laughed except for me. I chewed my paw nails. Ouch! Did I mention how much I hate swimming in the ocean? After we climbed into the car, Aunt Switford blew a kiss to Uncle Grayford and we left. I was trying to relax when Bugsy began to sing, I know a song that drives everybody crazy, over and over. This was going to be a long trip. Is this yours? By the time we got to the airport, my head was pounding, but since I am a true gentle mouse, I still offered to carry all the suitcase. Unfortunately, the rolling carts were all taken, so I had to carry everything by paw. My back was killing me, but that was only the beginning. We were waiting for our suitcase to go through the security scanner when the last bag on the conveyor belt set off the alarm. Beep, beep. I stared in horror at the suitcase. It was mine. Is this yours? A uniformed agent asked. When I said yes, he asked me to open it. I admit, I was a little embarrassed to have secretly pawing through my personal belongings. What if he saw my nightlight? Or my Swiss cheese underwear? Still, I had no choice. So I lifted the lid and discovered 10 bulky sweaters, a wool hat, waterproof gloves, hiking boots, and an ice pickaxe for glaciers, red munching rattlesnake. I somehow switched the contents of my cold weather suitcase with the contents of my hot weather suitcase. You can't carry a sharp ice pickaxe on an airplane. It's dangerous, the agent scolded. Where are you going? I coughed. I'm going to Shell Island, where I'm going to learn. I was so embarrassed. I didn't want to tell him what I was doing, but knew I should. Scuba diving, I mumbled, turning beet red. The agent looked at me sternly. Well then, you won't need the pickaxe, he said and took it away. An alarming pilot. What am I doing to do with this clothes? I wailed when I got to the suitcase pack. Don't worry, Jay, Petunia consoled me. It was simply mixed up, and this means that when we get to the island, we're going shopping. I sighed. Oh, how I hate shopping. Come on, let's move it. Our plane's about to leave, Petunia said. If I knew that what was waiting for me on the plane, I would have turned around and gone to the mountains. There were no regular flights to Shell Island, so the TV station Petunia was working for had organized a private flight. The problem, however, was not the plane, but the pilot. He looked like an aviator from the last century with his leather helmet and pair of goggles covered with dust. He also had a very loud voice. Welcome aboard! He shouted as soon as we boarded. My name is Flash Parrot, and I am captain of this aircraft. Buckle your seatbelt and bring your seat to an upright position. We are about to take off. We know what he's doing, right? I asked Petunia. He sure does, she answered with a smile. She continued excitedly. He's so good. He's won the Mouse Island stunt flying championship twice. As if he had heard her, Flash began zigzagging between the clouds, up and down and up and down. Yikes! Even if I wasn't such a scaredy mouse, I think that might have been too much for me. Finally, we cleared the clouds and the airplane settled into a normal flight path. After an hour, we came in sight of Shell Island. There it is! Exclaimed Petunia, pointing to a tiny emerald green spot shining in the middle of the dark blue South Pacific Ocean. It didn't look inhabited other than one small settlement. I can see the runway for the plane, I said worriedly. Of course you can't. There isn't any. Well, what do you mean there's no runway? How are we going to land? We land in the water and we'll get to shore with the airplane's life raft, Petunia exclaimed. What? Help! I yelled, terrified. Suddenly, the plane veered to the side and headed straight toward the ocean at full speed. Yikes! I wanted to laugh. Luckily, despite what I predicted, Flash landed the plane gently and smoothly. We got to shore in no time at all. A strange rodent greeted us on the beach. Welcome to Shell Island, Mr. Stitton. We've been waiting for you. The Provolone family. My name is Pinch Provolone, and I am the manager of the island's only hotel, the rodent continued. Nice to meet you, I replied. Please let my children Simon and Sinbad help you with your luggage, he said. Two muscular rodents began unloading our luggage with Pinch greeted Petunia and the others. Of course, Pinch had recognized Petunia. Did I mention that she is a popular TV reporter famous for saying animals and the environment? I was staring admiringly at Petunia when all of a sudden a voice called, Watch out! I saw a female rodent waving her paws at me. Then everything went black. I had been accidentally smacked in the head with a suitcase. When I came to the hotel, manager said, By the way, that was my daughter Serena. She'll show you to your room. When we reached my room, Petunia got me a bag of ice for the lump that was forming on my head. Aunt Whitford sat by me and held my paw. Smell this, dearie. Smell this, dearie, she said, shoving a little purple bottle under my nose. It perfumed cheese, ideal for headaches. I closed my eyes. Aunt Whitford was right. I felt a lot better. I thought about Pinch, Provolone, and his three children, Simon, Sinbad, and Serena. There was something about them that made them all look the same. What was it? Stay still. The next morning, I was having a famous dream in which Petunia and I were riding the waves on the back of a dolphin, but it was interrupted by someone knocking at my door. Who is it? I mumbled. It was Petunia. Did you forget, G? We have to go shopping, she squeaked. Thundering cattails. I knew I couldn't wear my winter boots on the beach, but I still hate shopping. Before I knew it, Petunia was dragging me all over the place. We scurried from store to store like two mice in a rat race. When we left, I was wearing 1. An orange flower shirt, 2. Pea green Bermuda shorts. 3. Bright purple sandals. 4. A multicolored caps. I felt like a colorblind tourist. You look great, G, exclaimed Petunia. Then she said goodbye and went off to being filming her documentary on the island. Benjamin tried not to laugh when he saw me, but Buggy Wuxie collapsed in a fit of giggles. Aunt Switford shooed him away. You look wonderful. All you need is a touch of lilac, she said as she wrapped a purple scarf around my neck. How embarrassing! But what could I do? I couldn't insult my sweet aunt, so dressed in that outfit, I left for my first scuba diving lesson. When I reached the pier, my instructor was already waiting for me aboard a little motorized dinghy. Strange, he looked just like Simon, one of Pinch Provolone's son. Surprise, Mr. Stilton, he asked. I help my dad in the hotel, and I'm also a diving instructor. But don't worry, I only lost one of my students so far, and it wasn't my fault, it was the sharks. The shark's fault? My whiskers twitched nervously. Oh, how I wish I were home. Before I knew it, Simon was helping me into my scuba suit. It was exhausting, getting into all the rubber. My fur felt like it was being ripped off, and I was sweating like crazy. Then, when Simon tried to help me into the boat, I tripped and ended up in the water. Splash! After he fished me out and they poised me back in the dinghy, I waved a miserable goodbye to Aunt Switford, Benjamin, and Bugsy Wuxie. Who knew if I ever see them again? We left the pier and headed off. Once we hit the ocean sea, Simon helped me put on my fins, mask, and tanks. Now, sit there on the edge of the dinghy. And whatever you do, don't move, he instructed. I did my best to stay still, but the boat was rocking back and forth, and the weight of the tank made me feel completely unbalanced. Stay still, I told myself, but it didn't work. A minute later, I fell backward into the water again. How humiliating and scary, and I saw something terrifying down there before Simon fished me out. Why didn't you stay still, Mr. Stilton? He asked, looking slightly annoyed. I tried, but the boat was rocking too much, and the tank is so heavy, and I mumbled. Simon rolled his eyes. Okay, he said, cutting me off, but you have to listen, or you'll never get to do any diving. To be honest, I wasn't sure I ever wanted to get back into the water after what I seen. Something down there tried to eat me, I told Simon. It looked like a gigantic blue fish with enormous teeth. A giant blue fish with big teeth? Simon asked with a smirk. Not just big teeth, I corrected him. They were huge, like daggers. Simon snorted. It was clear he didn't believe me. Codfish ice cream. That evening, at dinner, we all took turns thinking about our day. Benjamin and Bugsy Wuxie had gone swimming and made a sand sculpture. Aunt Switford had collected lilac-colored seashells to make a pretty necklace, and Petunia had filmed a lot of island and was already planning what she will shoot the next day. I was hoping no one would notice I hadn't said anything when Benjamin said, How about you, Uncle G? How was your first diving lesson? Well, it was pretty good, I mumbled. What could I say? It was totally disaster. I was completely clutch. I had to be rescued twice. Just then Pinch Provolone appeared with a huge platter of fish for the table. Don't be shy, Mr. Stilton, he chuckled. Tell your friends about the big blue fish that almost ate you alive. I turned red. I guess world travel fast on the island. You saw a big blue fish and you didn't tell us? Petunia squeaked. Tomorrow I'm coming with you. I got to film it. Immediately, I felt better. At least someone believed me. I was so happy that Petunia was going to come diving with me. I couldn't stop smiling. Dreamily, I shoved a fork full of squid covered in red sauce into my mouth. Big mistake. It was spicy. Fire! I shouted. I'm burning! Pinch grabbed a bucket of ice water and pours it over me. Oops, he said when he realized his mistake. Water dripped down my fur, forming a puddle around me. I wrung out my tail, feeling like a drowned rat. To make it up to me, Pinch insisted I try their special dessert, codfish ice cream. Not to self, ice cream plus fish. Yuck. I went to bed totally nauseous and dreamed I was being chased by a giant mouse eating bluefish. A giant oyster. The following morning, Aunt Switfer woke me up at 6:15. I have to talk to you, dear, she whispered mysteriously. I was so tired. I felt like I had been in the ring with Muhammad Squealy, the heavyweight boxing legend. Oh, why was Aunt Switfer waking me up at such an unmostly hour? I was so intrigued by your story about the gigantic bluefish. I called your uncle Rafer, she exclaimed. He told me there's only one creature living in the South Pacific Ocean with those characteristics. He also said that it's not a fish, it's a huge oyster. It's a special species that is referred to as the eye of the ocean. They're usually as large as a fist, but in extremely rare cases, they can become enormous, and that's when they are very valuable. Why? I asked, becoming more curious. I don't know. The line went dead, and I couldn't ask him. Oh, well, go back to sleep. Dearest nephew, sweet dreams. After Aunt Switfer left, I couldn't fall asleep. I kept thinking about the giant oyster. Then, just as I was starting to drift off, Petunia came into my room fully dressed. So, are we going? The sun is about to rise, she squeaked cheerfully. The prevailing brothers said I have a better chance of spotting the blue fish if we get there at the crack of dawn. I'll meet you at the pier, G. Reluctantly, I left my warm bed, got dressed, and headed for the pier. Simon, Sinbad, and Petunia were waiting for me. Once again, I struggled to get into my sweatsuit. What a workout! By the time I put my suit, mask, fins, and the heavy oxygen tanks, I was ready for a nap. Instead, we took off for deep waters. When we arrived, Simon said, "To be safe, I will be dry diving with you, Mr. Stitton." Then he buckled a weighted belt around my waist. "This is a ballast," Simon explained. "It used to help you get to the bottom." I gulped. But what if I wanted to get to the top? I was about to ask Simon when suddenly he yelled, "Go!" Then he drew me into the water. A drowned rat? A good thing was I was so surprised that I didn't have time to scream and embarrass myself in front of Petunia. The bad thing was I was so surprised that I held my breath. Immediately, I began to feel dizzy. Then I felt someone grab my paw. It was Petunia. Silently, me to breathe. So much her for not embarrassing myself, I followed her advice and realized I didn't need to hold my breath. I had on an oxygen tank. At that moment, Simon motioned for us to follow him. But I couldn't. The balance was dragging me straight to the bottom. I tried to move my fins like everyone else, but instead of going forward, I found myself spinning over and over. I looked like I was doing some kind of specific unclean water ballet. Luckily, Simon noticed and swam over to help me. Meanwhile, Petunia turned on the unclean water video camera. I timidly flipped my fins and was happy to see I was moving in the right direction. For a while, I swam behind Petunia and Simon, feeling pretty confident. Maybe this scuba diving thing wasn't so hard after all. Maybe it could even be fun. Maybe. A second later, one of the flippers slipped from my paw and I was left kicking sideways like a fish with one fin. Oh, why did these things always happen to me? The ballast started dragging me keep deeper and deeper toward the bottom. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't and no one noticed me. Simon was leading the way and Petunia was so intent on filming that nothing would have distracted her, handling flesh before my eyes. Publishers Deadly Dive, Geronimo Stitton, The Story of a Drowned Rat. The water was becoming dark and murky. It was so spooky. Could things get any worse than they did? Suddenly, I noticed a sparkling light below me. I looked down and saw the gigantic blue fish. Its mouth was wide open, and I was tumbling right into it. Ah! The eye of the ocean. Desperately, I began fumbling with the weight belt, trying to unbuckle it, but my paws were trembling so much I was getting nowhere. I sank deeper and deeper. Thundering cattails, the enormous jaws of the blue fish were closing in on me. I was about to become a mouthful of furry fish food. I looked up for the last time and thought I could see the light from Petunia's camera coming toward me. Goodbye, sweet Petunia, I sobbed to myself. Goodbye, family. Goodbye, world. But when I looked down again, I saw the most amazing sights. It was an enormous blue oyster, and the shell was completely open. In its center sat a huge glowing pearl. I couldn't believe my eyes. Uncle Grafer was right. I hadn't seen a gigantic blue fish. I had discovered the famous giant oyster, also known as the eye of the ocean. Unfortunately, as soon as I hit bottom, I kicked up a cloud of sand and the shell snapped itself shut as if it wanted to protect its treasure. A minute later, Simon also arrived. Simon tried to open the blue pod with his bare paws, but the oyster shell was completely sealed. He tried to force it with a rock, but still it wouldn't open. I was glad Petunia mentioned for him to stop. The oyster was so beautiful. It will be awful if he ruined it. Finally, Simon removed my weighted belt and signed for us to go up. I couldn't wait to reach the boat. A very rich mouse. As soon as we got out of the water, Simon told Sinbad all about the treasure I had discovered. I think it's the biggest example of the eye of the ocean that has ever been found, he said. Then, for some reason, the two of them exchanged an odd look. How strange. Meanwhile, Petunia was beaming. I'm so glad I was able to film this shell before it closed. I can hear this piece during my broadcast on the South Pacific Ocean, she squeaked. And I can write up an article for the Rodent Gazette today and mail it to the office, I added. Tomorrow, the amazing discovery of the eye of the ocean will be plastered all over the front page. Suddenly, my near-drowning experience seemed like it had been a lifetime ago. I was so excited about the oyster. I hardly noticed Simon and Sinbad shooting me strange looks. Maybe they were staring at my fur. It was sticking up all over the place after our dive. Later at dinner, Provence explained that since I had found the sea pearl, tradition ruled that it belongs to me. You are a very rich mouse, Mr. Stitton, he declared. Then he promised that his whole family will be more than happy to help me retrieve the enormous oyster from the bottom of the sea. Ons, Whitford, Benjamin, and Boxy Woxy wanted to hear all about how I found the oyster, so I told them. I wonder how much that pearl is worth, Boxy thought aloud when I had finished. It's priceless, Benjamin answered. Aunt Whitford nodded. It seems a shame to take something so priceless from the ocean. Maybe it's best to leave it where it is. What do you think, Geronimo? After all, it is your decision. I scratched my head. On the one paw, it would be an amazing treasure to own, but on the other paw, I agree with Aunt Whitford. The pearl belonged to the ocean. I knew I had to do the right thing. Finally, I said, I will publish my finds in the paper, and Petunia will air her piece on TV. But we will leave the oyster in its natural home, the ocean. Petunia looked at me with tears in her eyes. Oh, gee, you're such a gentle mouse, she said with a sigh. I was so busy staring with Petunia's eyes, I didn't notice Simon, Sinbad, and Serena scamper out of the room, but Benjamin and Bugsy did, and they were worried. Geronimo, where is your laptop? Benjamin squeaked. And where is your video camera, Aunt Petunia? Bugsy added. A bad feeling washed over me. Stolen? I I ran to my room to check my laptop while Petunia checked her room for her video camera. Moldy mozzarella. They were both missing. Now I couldn't send my article to the Rotten Gazette, and Petunia couldn't air the film she had taken of the eye of the ocean. I wasn't shocked. Was someone out to steal the giant oyster and the giant pearl before we spread the news of its discovery? But who? We headed down to the lobby to talk to the manager. Stolen, Pinch said when he heard our news. How strange. Nothing like this has ever happened in my hotel. Who could it have been? Petunia crossed her paws. Maybe you could tell us where your children ran off to after dinner, she said. But just then, Simon, Sinbad, and Serena arrived carrying a large cheesecake platter. We were just getting to dessert when Serena squeaked. I was going to ask why it took 3 mice to carry one platter, but I was too busy drooling. Did I mention I love cheesecake? We will keep our eyes peeled for the missing items, Pinch assured me as I nibbled one tiny piece of cheesecake. Well, okay, maybe it was more like 4 giant pieces of cheesecake, but who's counting? Just then, Aunt Switfer appeared. I hope you don't mind, Geronimo, she said, but I called the Rotten Gazette and told them about the Eye of the Ocean. I said you will contact them with the details. Is that okay? Perfect, I beamed. And tomorrow, Petunia and I can go back and record more footage. For some reason, the Provon family looked less than excited, but there was no time to worry about them now. I had to call the paper and maybe the one more piece of cheesecake I couldn't resist. Finally, I called the Rotten Gazette. When I was done squeaking, I sat down on my bed and screamed. Ouch! A splinter was stuck in my paw. Aunt Whitford gently removed it and held it up. It wasn't a splinter. It was a gold earring. Whose could it be? That night, I couldn't get to sleep, partly because I couldn't stop thinking about the earring, and partly because I had a terrible stomach. Why had I eaten all that cheesecake? Professor Gill Fishy Whiskers. The following morning, the Rotten Gazette sold out all across New Mouse City. In just a few hours, the news of my discovery had spread all over the island. Then a strange thing happened. Pinch Prevon knocked at my door. We found your computer, Mr. Stitton, he said. The housekeeper found it in the hallway along with Petunia's video camera. He was about to leave when I stopped him. Wait, I said, handing him the gold earring I had found in my room. Whoever took my computer must have lost this. Pinch turned red, grabbed the earring, and disappeared. It was then that I remembered who wore gold earrings, the Provon children. Just then my cell phone began ringing like crazy. So much for the quick rat nap I was hoping to catch. Here's who called me on the phone. 1. Sally Ratmousin, who was so jealous she could hardly squeak. 2. Grandfather William Shortpaws, who was so happy he could hardly squeak. 3. Mayor Frederick Fuzzypaw, who wanted to exhibit the shell at the New Mouse City Mouse Museum of Natural History. 4. 25 collectors who wanted to buy the pearl. 5. $25 who wanted to buy the pearl, and many others. By the time I hung up, I was exhausted. I went to find my friend. I don't know what to do, I squeaked worriedly. Everyone wants to get their paws on the pearl. I chewed on my whiskers, feeling helpless. How could I make sure that the Eye of the Ocean was safe? Anyone could steal it from the ocean. The more I thought about it, the more hopeless I felt. Before long, I was sobbing with like a newborn mouthlet. How humiliating. Petunia interrupted my crying drag. Cheer up, G, she said. I have a plan. Then she told me that she had called Uncle Grayfer and he had given her the number of the director of the New Mouse City Aquarium. His name was Professor Gill Fishy Whiskers. He's an old friend of your uncle's. He'll help us, Petunia insisted. Soon I was on the phone with Professor Fishy Whiskers. The minute I introduced myself, he began squeaking so fast I wondered how he was able to breathe. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. Apparently, he too had read the paper and was thrilled by my discovery. Don't move from where you are, he shouted excitedly. I'll be on She Island sometime in the morning with the proper gear. That oyster needs to be removed very carefully. It's an extremely rare specimen. I hung up the phone, feeling a whole lot better. Professor Fishy Whiskers to the rescue, but just then I had the thought that made me shudder. What if the Provolone siblings had already taken the oyster last night? Lucky for me, Petunia read my mind. Don't worry about the provolines, G. I didn't want to steal the oysters, so yesterday I took the plug from their boat. She giggled, holding up the plug. It's an invasion. Even though we had the plug from the Purvoline's boat, we decided it would be a good idea to keep an eye on them anyway. Honest Whitford offered to watch the beach with Benjamin and Boxy Woxy while Petunia and I hung around the hotel. But first we had to eat breakfast. I was starving. I had just ordered the Shell Island Happy Morning Special, a 3-cheese omelet, cheddar, home fries, a mozzarella milkshake, and a fruit bowl. When we heard a loud noise coming from the docks outside, we saw dozens of boats sailing into the port. Reporters, collectors, and other curious rodents were swarming the island, hoping to sneak a peek at the eye of the ocean. Pinch Provone was hysterical. It's an invasion. Do something, Mr. Stilton, he squeaked. I had to admit, it was a little scary to see all those rodents clambering up the beach, squeaking at the top of their lungs. Still, I tried to remain calm. It's okay, I told Pinch. In a few hours, a team from the new Mouse City Aquarium will be here to remove the oyster, and everything will be back to normal. Pinch nodded, but he didn't look happy. He ran off and began chattering up a storm with Simon. Fortunately, Professor Fishy Whiskers was a mouse of his word. It wasn't long before he arrived in a strange-looking craft that read New Mouse City Aquarium Laboratory Ship on its side. I shook paws with the professor and we all boarded to the ship. As soon as we got on board, Simon ran over to the ship's captain, and the two began whispering. It seemed Simon and Captain B, Crook Paw, also known as Old Crook, Cat Paw, and the Cookinator, knew each other well. How strange, but there was no time to think about it. Before long, we reached the area where we first found the oyster. A scuba dive, jump into the water. I held my breath. I was a wreck. What if something had happened to the oyster? Spectacular. I stared into the water, feeling faint. If the oyster was missing, everyone would think I was a lying cheese brain. I was so worried I hardly noticed the boats around our ship filled with reporters, collectors, and other sightseers. Finally, the driver reassured face. He had found the oyster. He put it in a safety net, and Captain Crook Paw used a crane to hoist it up. As soon as the eye of the ocean emerged from the sea, the crowd cheered. It was spectacular. Video camera rolled and camera flashed again and again as everyone gawked at the incredible, enormous oyster. Slowly, Captain, be careful, Professor Fishy Whiskers warned. The captain lowered the oyster through a large trapdoor that led to the holding tank. We raced down the stairs. After it was Petunia filmed the entire thing. Then the professor began examining the shell, taking its weight and measurement, and photographing it from every angle. Finally, the oyster was x-rayed, revealing the enormous pearl hidden inside. It's absolutely fabulous, exclaimed the professor as soon as he was the x-ray. Now what are we going to do? I asked the professor. I was feeling very responsible for the oyster and was still a little nervous that someone might damage it. Don't worry, we'll immerse the oyster in a special made tank filled with seawater. Then we'll place the tank into a wooden crate cushion with packing materials and transport it home, he exclaimed. We've got a beautiful new tank at the aquarium ready to hold it. Rodents will come from all over the world to admire this rare find. I sighed with relief. I was so glad the professor had arrived and taken control of the situation. Being responsible for such a priceless treasure was making my whiskers twitch. Now everyone watched as the giant oyster was placed in the wooden crate and sealed shut. Then Simon asked a question I hadn't even thought about. Once the closed shell is settled in your aquarium, Professor, how will anyone be able to see the enormous pearl inside? He said. The professor nodded knowingly. Young mouse, I'm happy to inform you that I know the secret to opening the shell without damaging in any way. Of course I can tell you how I do it, for security reason, you understand. But if you come to the new Mouse City Aquarium, I guarantee you will see the enormous pearl in all its glory, he squeaked excitedly. Simon nodded and exchanged a look with the captain. How strange. A bad feeling. By the time the oyster was packed up safe and sound, it was dusk. The professor wanted to leave immediately, but Captain Crookpaw refused to sail. We'll spend the night at the dock. We'll then leave just first thing in the morning, he insisted. Later at dinner, Professor Fishy Whiskers stroked the beard nervously. I'm not sure why, but I have a bad feeling, he confessed. I think it will be a good idea if we all keep an eye on the oyster tonight. Petunia and I volunteered to stay on the boat and guard the oyster while Aunt went first date with Benjamin and Boxy Woxy in the hotel. After dinner, we went back to the laboratory ship to spend the night. I had to admit I wasn't crazy about the idea of sleeping on a boat, but I did mention that I get seasick. Oh well, at least the boat was staying at the dock. I was just thinking that maybe I shouldn't have eaten that second loaded cheddar burger when the professor waved us into his cabin. I'm worried, he whispered. The oyster is in danger, and I might be as well. If something happens to me, I want you to know how to open the eye of the ocean without harming it. Don't be silly, Professor, Petunia reassured him, but the professor insisted. He whispered the secret in our ears. Petunia and I looked at each other in surprise. Now that I told you, I feel better, said the professor. Go and take your watch guarding the oyster. We'll say goodbye tomorrow morning. Petunia and I settled out ourselves on the ship's deck wrapped in woolen blanket. Above us, the sky was filled with stars. For a while, I forgot about the oyster. It was a beautiful night, and I was with the mouse of my dreams. Too bad I was tired. Before long, I was snoring away. When I woke up at dawn, I was drooling. How embarrassing. Even worse, when I went to check on the oyster, I discovered the professor had disappeared. Open that crate. We looked for the professor everywhere. Aunt Switford, Benjamin, Boxy Woxy, and even some of the Prevolin family helped us search, but there was no trace of him. He had vanished. Where had he gone? My mind raced. Back at the pier, we saw a helicopter circling the beach. Simon was showed it to where to land. Meanwhile, on the ship, Captain Crookpaw was used Captain Crookpaw was using the crane to lift the crates containing the oyster up into the air. Stop, I cried. What's going on? Captain Crookpaw stared down at me with steely eye. Mr. Stitton, I am only protecting the oyster, he announced. It's not safe on this ship now that the professor had disappeared, so I called the aquarium's head office. They sent us a helicopter to transport the oyster. The captain was right. The ship was not safe anymore. What if the oyster went missing, just like the professor? Still, something was bothering me. Okay, I agreed. But before you leave, I want to make sure the oyster is still in its place. That means we'll have to open the crate. It will take too long, right, Captain? Simon objected. Suddenly, as I stared at Simon and the crate, I realized that it was bothering me. Captain, I insist you open that crate now, I demanded. All right, the captain grumbled. Don't get your whiskers in a twist. Everything's the same. Reluctantly, the captain lifted the lid of the crate and everyone peeked inside. At first, I was relieved. The oyster was still there, immersed in the water. But then I noticed something strange. That's odd. It doesn't seem like the same oyster, I murmured. The captain scoffed. Of course it's the same one. He reached for the lid, struggling to replace it. It's exactly the same, added Simon, who was sweating like a sprinkler. Oh, winking. I think it looks fine, G, said Petunia, winking at me. Everything the same, Aunt Switford agreed, winking at me as well. What was with all the winking? Was my fur a mess? Did I have a piece of cheese stuck between my teeth? I looked at Benjamin. The oyster looked perfect, Uncle Geronimo, he announced, shooting me a look. Bugsy Wugsy nodded, grabbing my paw and squeezing it hard. Youch! I chewed my whisker to keep from squeaking. What was everyone trying to tell me? I was still trying to figure it out when the captain interrupted my thought. See, there's no problem, he declared. A minute later, he signaled for the helicopter to remove the crate. Then the captain and Simon disappeared into the ship. Do you think it will get there safely? I asked. It doesn't matter, G, Petunia said, because the real oyster is not that in that crate. It's a fake. We all realized, but we didn't want the captain or any of the Provence to know we are onto them. That's what we are trying to tell you. I nodded slowly, so that's why everyone was winking at me. Still, I was confused. But how can you be so sure it's a fake? I asked. Benjamin smiled. It was simple, Uncle Geronimo. He just studied the shell, he exclaimed. Petunia's note. Petunia explained to me that the real oyster shell has 5 ribs on it, while the fake one has only 4. Now I knew why something seemed different about the shell. The captain and the Provence were out to trick us. They were out to steal the oyster. All of a sudden, I felt sick. If the real oyster wasn't on its way to New Mouse City, then where was it? Was it still on the island? And where was Professor Fish Whiskers? Back at the hotel, my mind raced. This trip was turning into a total nightmare. What else could go wrong? I was so worried about everything I couldn't think straight. I chewed my paw nails and my tail wouldn't stop twitching. To calm myself, to calm my nerves, I tried doing a few relaxing yoga moves I had learned from my cousin's Serenity Sultan. They didn't work instead. I ended up twisting myself up like a pretzel. Ugh. Next, I tried drinking a soothing cup of chamomile tea, but it was too hot, and I burned my tongue. Ouch! Then I decided to take a nice warm bath. Too bad I accidentally poured Suntan lotion into the tub instead of bubble bath. Yuck! Finally, I gave up and headed off to dinner. Aunt Switford, Benjamin, and Bugsy Wugsy were all waiting for me. But where was Petunia? No one had seen her. We decided to check her room. When we got there, I knocked, but there was no answer. The door wasn't locked, so we went in. The room was empty. Then I spotted a small note on the dresser. It was addressed to Geronimo. I opened it with a trembling paws. It read, There's a big cave on the west side of the beach. I might have found the oyster and something else as well. I'll wait for you there. Hurry, Petunia. P.S. Bring Aunt Switford's flute. The cave. My fur stood on end. But there was no time to take another crack at those relaxing yoga moves now. We had to find Petunia. Aunt Switford grabbed the flute, and we all stalked off into the night. Luckily, Benjamin had brought along a flashlight, which we used to find our way to the beach. Once there, we headed west just like Petunia had instructed. The sand was squishy beneath my paws, and once or twice I felt like I may have stepped on a sea crab. I tried not to think about it. Did I mention I'm not being big on crusty sea creatures, especially ones that like to pinch you with their claws when you least suspect it? Finally, after that about 15 minutes, we saw a bright light coming from what appeared to a cave. Aunt Switford told Benjamin and Buggy to stay put while we went and had to investigate. I was dying to stay put myself, but how could I send an old lady off alone in the dark? Slowly, we crept forward toward the light. When we reached the cave, we peeked inside. Sitting around the campfire were the Provence children and Captain Crookpaw. They were squeaking and laughing like old friends. In a corner, I spotted poor Professor Fish Whiskers tied up like a salami. And in the center of the cave sat the Eye of the Ocean. You better tell us how to open that oyster, Professor, if you know what's good for you, Simon threatened. But the professor refused to squeak. Hi, Simon, Sinbad piped up. How about we break the shell with the hammer? Good idea, Simon snickered, reaching for the tool. This sent the professor into a frenzy. No, he shrieked. That oyster is a rare treasure, a priceless discovery, a unique specimen. On Switford and I tiptoed away. Maybe if the professor could keep the crooks talking, we could think of some way to help. At that moment, Benjamin and Wuxie ran up to us. Look who we found, they cried. The ghost of Shell Island. The voice I heard in the dark made my heart skip. Did you bring the flute, G? It was Petunia. Sorry I worried you, she whispered, taking the flute from me. What are we going to do? I asked. Don't worry, I got a plan. Listen carefully, Petunia began. I grinned. I should have known Petunia would figure out what to do. Now do you see why I like her so much? That mouse thinks of everything. Following Petunia, we climbed it up the rocks to the top of the cave. Petunia pointed to a small crevice of the cave ceiling, which gave us a perfect view inside. Okay, it's up to you, Petunia whispered to Benjamin. Do you remember what to say? He nodded, leaning toward the crack. Then he took a deep breath and bellowed at the top of his lungs. You miserable rodents! How dare you enter my sacred cave? As Petunia had projected, Benjamin's voice reverberated throughout the cave like thunder. It sounded so scary. I had to remind myself it was just my nephew. Meanwhile, the Provolone siblings and the captain turned as white as 4 slices of mozzarella. Benjamin covered his mouth to keep from laughing. Who are you? The captain asked. I am the ghost of Shell Island. How dare you steal one of my most beautiful daughters from my waters? Benjamin yelled. We didn't steal it, we found it, Simon insisted. Besides, how do we know you are not a crook? How dare you call me a crook? Now you will pay, my nephew shouted. At this, Petunia quickly approached the crack and began playing the flute. Is this a joke? Asked Simon, looking around. But just then the oyster shell began to open, revealing its great treasure, the enormous pearl. That was Professor Fisher Whisker's secret. The shell will open at the sound of music. Let's grab it and get out of here, cried the captain, hurling himself toward the pearl. The Provolone sibling followed him. Goodbye, Pearl, I murmured. But Petunia had a plan. She waited until those crooks stretched their paws toward the pearl, and then she suddenly stopped playing. The shell shut on their paws with a loud snap. Help, let us go, they cried. Promise you will never set paw in this cave ever again, Benjamin yelled into the crack. We promise, yelled the crooks, sobbing like baby mouths. Then Petunia played a few notes on the flute and the shell opened. Captain Crookpaw and the Provolone siblings took off with their tails between their legs. You think we'll ever see them again, Uncle G? Benjamin asked. Not a ghost of a chance, I replied, and everyone laughed. 20 minutes later, we loaded the oyster back onto the laboratory ship. To New Mouse City, Professor Fishy Whiskers cheered as we set sail with our precious treasure safe and sound. A good luck charm. On the day they opened a new exhibit at the New Mouse City Aquarium, everyone was there. Mayor Frederick Fuzzy Paws, Professor Fisher Whiskers, the entire staff of the Rodent Gazette, and lots of other curious rodents. Naturally, we were all there as well. Even though I had been the one to find the oyster, I knew it was just dumb luck that had led me to it. I tried my best to let Petunia to do all the taking. After all, if it wasn't for her documentary, we would have never been on Shell Island in the first place. But when all the photographers began snapping photos, Petunia wanted me right by her side. Picture it, me by my side. Was the most fascinating rodent on all of Mouse Island, the rodent of my dreams. I was in heaven. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more exciting, the most famous music began playing from the overhead speakers. To everyone's surprise, the eye of the ocean slowly opened, revealing the enormous pearl inside. Oh! The crowd gasped in amazement. I took that moment to whisper to my aunt Switford the one question I had been meaning to ask her. Why does she have a flute in her suitcase on our trip? It's a special gift Uncle Grayfur gave me many years ago. It's my good luck charm. I take it with me everywhere I go, she beamed. I show Petunia on the plane right over to Shell Island. Isn't that luck? I smiled. It sure was. I gazed again at the enormous pearl before me and then at Petunia by my side. No, I didn't have a good luck charm like Aunt Switfur, but right then I felt like the luckiest rodent on Mouse Island. So, today I already read this book, so bye-bye for now. We'll see tomorrow. So bye bye everyone. Bye bye.